It started as a small sound, a soft buzz on the counter beside my teacup, the kind of sound that says, "You belong here, come look." I wiped my hands on a towel, opened my phone, and smiled at the screen. The family chat, my children, my grandchildren, a bright little circle of faces that meant home. My granddaughter had finally added me that morning. She wrote, "Welcome, Grandma," with 3 hearts. I typed back, "Thank you, sweetheart." And then, nothing. The dots appeared, the ones that mean someone's typing. Then they vanished. A few moments later, photos began to roll through. Jokes, plans, inside laughter. None of it to me. Not even a hello. I watched as the conversation built walls right in front of my eyes. Cheerful, invisible ones. My tea went cold. My thumb hovered above the send button. And for the first time in my own family, I felt like a stranger looking through a window. The little blue dots stopped blinking, and I saw the thread that named me without naming me. Now, listen, my dears. I know it's just a phone screen, words on glass, little icons with smiles. But when the people you raised start talking around you instead of to you, that silence has weight. Today we're talking about that weight, about belonging, boundaries, and what happens when a little blue notification turns into a wall. If you've ever felt the quiet sting of being left out by your own, this story is for you. I hope you'll tap that little like button, maybe subscribe, so these stories can reach someone else sitting alone with a cooling cup of tea and a phone that's too quiet. Because what I learned from that day wasn't just about technology, it was about dignity, about how we teach our families to see us again. Stay with me. I'll show you what those messages said and why they mattered. The kettle sized the same way it has for 30 years. I know that sounds like a friend. I set the saucer down with the thumb press I learned from my mother. The radio hums, the old morning hour. The porch light begins its soft buzz as afternoon thins toward dusk. These are little anchors. They tell me which way the day goes. My phone lives on the small table by the window. I keep it face down until my tea cools a bit. It feels polite to let the morning settle. The screen is a rectangle of possibility. Photos from church, a quick joke, the small, bright faces of grandchildren. For a long time the family chat was background music. A candid picture here, a proud grandma emoji there. It made the house feel fuller without changing anything. When my granddaughter finally added me, I was pleased. I thought, finally, a new way to pass along the cat pictures. I opened the chat with more care than I had any right to. I wanted to be part of the noise, not the silence at the edge of it. I typed a little hello the way my mother taught me. "Good morning, my loves." I hit send and felt a small, warm rush. The blue dots appeared. Someone was typing. Then the dots went away. Then, one after another, messages came that were not meant for me to answer. The first thing was a photo, a sunlit backyard, a plate of my granddaughter's scones. They laughed in the comments, joked about the recipe. Then a plan, shift next Sunday, we'll do brunch at Mom's. Names went by like leaves. My name appeared in the caption, a polite tag, but not a greeting. It was as if they had set a place at the table with a card that said reserved, but then whispered among themselves, and forgot to call me in. It felt small, and then it felt large. My fingers hovered. I cleared my throat and looked around the room. The chair by the window that used to hold my husband. The teacup that had a tiny chip on the rim. The sunflower pin on my sweater my daughter had given me last Christmas. The house was exactly as it always had been, but my place in the picture felt rearranged. You learn a lot about belonging by what people remember to ask you to do. For years, the family calendar was on the fridge. We called ahead. We left messages by the phone. Now plans zipped by like lightning and landed as facts in a group thread. Decisions that used to be spoken over the phone were made with a tap and moved on. The technology felt cold because it moved so fast. It did not get the way. My hand cradled the saucer. It did not know the pause in my breath when someone I loved spoke without looking at me. There was a sudden awareness. The house full of small rituals I'd tended my whole life could exist right alongside a new practice that made me optional. I kept watching the chat. They shared a video of my grandson's first bike wobble. I clapped in my chest. I pressed a heart emoji because that is what you do. I wrote, "Lovely. Tell him I'm proud." No one answered directly. The conversation moved on. The porch light hummed, indifferent. My tea cooled. I felt the small, hot prickle of being looked past. My mother used to say, when a person is not greeted, notice it. She taught me to make the space for people. So I sat further forward in my chair and decided I would not let myself be a footnote. If the family was making plans, I would ask about them. If they forgot my name, I would put it back where it belonged. But the first message after I joined was a photo, and my name was in the caption, but not in the greeting. There are lessons that get under your skin and never leave. My mother used to keep a lamp lit for anyone who might walk home late. She would sweep the porch and set an extra cup just in case. My father kept ledgers, and he taught me to trust a neat row of numbers. They taught me that greeting someone by name is not mere politeness. It's a small, public way of saying you see them. When I courted my husband, we spoke plainly. We promised to show up. We promised to keep our word. We meant small things. A chair saved at the theater, a phone call when work ran late, a pie brought when a neighbor was sick. Those were the contracts that built our house. They were never written in ink on a contract. They were written in gestures. I remember teaching my children the same little rules. Answer when someone calls. I would say, if you say you'll come, you come. I taught my son how to tie a tie and how to fold a shirt so it would not wrinkle. I taught him how to write a note that would mean something. We were not grand or flashy. We were steady. That steadiness is what I took pride in. So when an app started to mediate our gatherings, I did not see it as a threat at first. I saw it as a new table to set. I could post a recipe, share a photo, send a memory. I thought it would be another way to be present. Respect, to me, is small and consistent. It is the difference between hearing and including, between noticing and pretending not to notice. That my mother used to say, the easiest thing in the world is to forget to greet someone. She meant it as a warning. Welcome is an act. It isn't just the opening of a door. It is the naming of a person when you speak of them. For decades I lived that way. The idea that my family could be present in a thread of jokes and plans and leave the seat beside me unfelt it. Idea felt like a betrayal of a family practice I had helped teach. We raised our kids to be polite, to be responsible. We expected that those small education habits would carry forward. So when the group chat made a pattern, I did not recognize quick decisions, inside jokes without checking, plans made without asking. My first instinct was to assume confusion. Maybe they did not know I preferred a phone call for plans. Maybe the young ones thought it simpler to post and move on. But it was not confusion that cut, it was a kind of choice. They were choosing a speed that left me behind. They were choosing a place where my voice was optional. These are not grand betrayals. They are frost on the small kindnesses that warm a life. When you spend a lifetime teaching children to answer the bell, there is a particular sting to being omitted from the greeting. It feels, in a way, like a promise unkept, not by malice perhaps, but by inattention that turns into pattern. I find comfort in small proofs. I kept old letters folded safely in a drawer. I have a shoebox of notes my husband wrote on the back of receipts. I have ledgers where every bill paid is a neat line. Those things are how I remember who I am, someone who values promises and the small rituals that make a life decent. So when the chat left my presence as if it were a preference, I could not help but recall every lesson about names and greeting. I remembered how I taught my son to text back when his friends messaged. I remembered showing him how a single thoughtful sentence could steady a person. I asked myself, had I done something to deserve being sidelined? Or had the family, in learning a new way to live, simply forgotten a small but important lesson? I taught my son to text back, but in the group, his thumbs moved without mine. We built our life out of small things, morning coffee together, fixing the fence in the spring, birthdays that required a pie and a napkin, little economies of care, who would take the child to the dentist, who would pick up the mail when someone was sick. Over time, those arrangements turned into a kind of family grammar. The grammar meant we knew each other's habits, and we used those habits to keep the household steady. Technology slipped in like a new dialect. Group messages were convenient. They were quick, efficient. They solved the question of who will bring the salad in minutes. For a while, they felt like an improvement. I liked the walks of photos. I liked seeing the dog with a sweater. I liked knowing what my children were doing in a nearer, brighter way. What I did not notice at first was how habits change when the tools do. A favor that once began with a phone call now began with a post. Decisions that used to be mutual became the outcome of whoever typed fastest. Old patterns that required conversation turned into new patterns decided by whoever had the app open. Small assumptions crept in. She already knows became an easy thing to think. It will be fine turned into the reason not to pick up the phone. Favors are little loans of time and attention. When you give a favor and it becomes a default, the lines of consent can blur. I watched that happen without noticing. A weekend turned into a new habit. Somebody else did the grocery run. Somebody else took the dogs. It was kindness. It was also a redistribution of responsibility that no one had spelled out. You do not notice a fault line until the house shifts. For us, the house shifted in small ways. A different car in the drive, a different voice on the answering machine, a new person who wouldn't ask for permission because no one had told them to. The small courtesy of asking, of naming someone when you speak of them, was replaced by habit. It looked like efficiency. It felt, to me, a little like being edged out. When the family chat became a place where plans were made and I was only a background name in the caption, the quiet fault line became visible. It was not dramatic. No one slammed a door. No one declared a rupture. It was the ordinary kind of change that happens when people mean well but stop asking. I asked myself, had we taught this? Had we, by being helpful, taught each other that help can include control? There is a difference between offering to do a thing and assuming you may do it forever. There is a difference between choosing to ease someone's life and choosing to decide it for them. The truth is, conveniences accumulate, and where convenience rules, the rituals that held us can be unpicked without notice. I began to see a pattern. Whoever typed quickest set the table. Whoever messaged most often set the plans. It made life smoother for some. It left others feeling like guests in their own story. When that message popped up about a plan, a day trip, a family work event, I realized I had not been asked if I wanted to go. I had not been consulted. I had been told. The fault line was small, but it was there, and small fault lines can become fissures if you let them. A message popped up that mentioned a plan I had no idea I was supposed to follow. One of my granddaughters had been persistent. "Grandma, you should be in the chat," she said, like it was the last piece of a puzzle. She promised to send me pictures. I agreed. I thought it would be a small pleasure, a postcard of daily life delivered in light. I tapped join, and felt that soft little thrill of being included. For a moment, the screen was full of warmth, photos of lunches, a new haircut, a quick video of the dog chasing leaves. I replied with a heart, and then with a sentence, the way my mother taught me, a short friendly thing. "Lovely, my dear. Tell him I'm proud." I expected a wave of replies and small chatter. Instead, I felt a hush, like stepping into a room where people have just stopped singing. Messages spilled by quickly, like pebbles on a pond. Inside jokes, a link to a bakery, plans for Sunday brunch. My name appeared in a caption beneath a photo, a kind, almost dutiful tag. But when it came to making plans or asking for help, the thread moved on, as if I were not there to answer. Maybe they thought I would reply later. Maybe they assumed. The gap between assumption and inclusion can be very small. It can also be an opening. Then I saw it, a private joke. The kind that hurts because it makes you feel watched while excluded. I shouldn't have looked for offense, but human beings do look for patterns. The pattern suggested decisions were being made in a room I had just been invited into, not with me. When I asked, via a gentle message, whether I should bring anything to brunch, the replies came slowly and with punctuation that felt like a door closing. "Oh, we'll let you know, and we'll handle it." They were polite. They were measured. They were also distancing. That's when the choice arrived. Do I raise my voice and demand to be seen, or do I let the whispering continue and keep the peace? It felt like holding a card that said either confront or retreat. My husband used to say, "Speak plain, Evie. People can handle the truth if you give it kindly." I thought of his voice in the quiet kitchen. The kettle hissed. The afternoon light slanted across the table. The chat moved like weather, and I stood at the window without an umbrella. I sent another message. It was ordinary. It was not dramatic. I wrote, "If you're planning brunch, I can bring the lemon tart. I'd love to join." I hit send and felt the small, childlike hope that family habits could be asked back into being. A sibling posted a photo of a family event and wrote, "Next time we'll tell Grandma after." When a family answers you with long pauses and clipped sentences, the silence says more than the words. I began to test the room with small probes. I sent a private text to my son. "Did you get my tart offer? I'd love to help." The reply came much later. "We've got it covered, Mom. Don't worry." It was not unkind, but it was not inclusion. Then I posted a lighthearted question in the group about the recipe my granddaughter had used. The question floated there like a paper boat. Someone replied with an emoji, someone else with 3 laughing faces. No one answered the recipe question. I'm not naive. Families change, children grow and have their rhythms, but those waiting rhythms are not the same as the ones that erase you. It felt, little by little, like being given a seat on the porch that everyone walked past without pausing. Neighbors began to notice. Mrs. Parang, from across the street, stopped to bring a casserole and asked, sideways, "Has anything happened, dear?" I smiled and said, "Oh, nothing," because people bring casseroles for many reasons, but the look she gave me the next day, the tilt of an eyebrow, the small pursing of lips, told me gossip was starting to spin. In small towns, gossip is a low murmur, not a shout. It arrives folded in casseroles and church hall hugs. Then one evening, my daughter called. Her voice was careful. She said, "Maybe don't post too much right now, Mom. They were just planning, you know, and then, maybe stay out of the group for a while." She meant it to be kind. I heard it like a soft instruction to make myself small. That particular message landed like a stone in a pond. I had thought family was a mutual circle. Here, it felt more like a set of concentric rings where I had been nudged to the outer one. I started keeping notes, not because I wanted to make a case, because when your own home feels uncertain, small records bring comfort. I noted times a message went unanswered, who posted what, the dates of plans I wasn't invited to, even the little phrases used to refer to me. The accumulation began to read like a ledger of being overlooked. It made me feel both foolish and alarmed. Foolish because these seemed like petty wounds in the face of real problems life can bring. Alarmed because small exclusions become habits that harden. Often the replies were punctuation rather than conversation. A comma became a shield. An ellipsis became a door held half closed. I remembered how my husband used to say, when people are hurried, they forget the small courtesies. Help them remember. I wanted to help them remember, but asking to be remembered is sometimes read as being difficult at church the next Sunday. Someone I'd known for decades touched my arm and said, "It's easier for everyone if she steps back." Who is she in these sentences? I could feel the phrase compressing me to an idea rather than a person. The digital turning away is so quiet because it's polite. The words are soft. The omissions are neat. And the people who say them believe they are sparing feelings. But sparing one feeling can wound another. One child sent a private message. Maybe stay out of the group for a while. The turning point between annoyance and real damage is often practical. A plan on a screen that excludes you can do more than bruise feelings. It can change who shows up on a doorstep and who is counted for care. A few weeks in, I opened the chat to find a rota for weekend caregiving. It was a neat, color-coded schedule. Names were assigned to school pickups, to the Saturday morning grocery runs, to sitting with Aunt Lillian on her chemo days. I read it twice, looking for my name. There was a tidy list of tasks, and no one had included me. No call, no prior conversation. Just the spreadsheet of need, filed and decided. I called my son. He was at work and said, "We wanted to make it simple." Simple for whom? Simple for the family? Sure. Simple often means fewer voices in the room, fewer questions. He told me they'd thought it kinder to arrange the rota without asking everyone. "We can add you next month," he said, as if a month could repair being left out of a week when someone needed help. Then there was the weekend. I'd planned to visit my sister. I'd arranged my bus. I'd put a little cake in the tin. The morning of, a stream of photos appeared in the chat. Cousins at brunch, the park with balloons, the very table I'd planned to sit at. I called my sister in confusion. She sounded confused back, then embarrassed. "Oh, we thought it would be better without you this time," she said. Better for whom? The life of convenience moves fast on a little screen. Decisions that used to be protective, keeping someone from stress, sparing them a long trip, sometimes become decisions that exclude. I understand kinder motives. I also understand that excluding someone because you think you're doing them a favor is a practice that reduces agency. I began to notice practical patterns, invites posted as afterthoughts, photos taken as records of things already decided, messages that assumed my absence. The chat made presence into a thing you could schedule without conversation. Presence used to be called, now it was posted. There are times when family needs to act fast. Emergencies happen, but conveyor belt decisions are not emergencies. They are habits. Habits can be fixed, but only if someone is willing to speak up. I tried to speak up, not with accusation but with a question. "If there's a rota, I can help with one morning. Please include me." The reply was brief. "We already covered this week, Mom. Maybe another time. Maybe." Those little maybes are the nails that hold a pattern in place. A message asked who could watch the kids, and the list didn't include me. There is a particular hurt when you find your name on a screen in the context of conversation about you, rather than to you. It is more than omission. It is the sense of being discussed in the second-hand tenses. One evening, someone in the family forwarded me a screenshot. I saw a subthread I'd not been invited into. A private set of messages where family members debated whether it was appropriate to include me in certain events. The tone was clinical. Too much, one person wrote, might be awkward, another suggested. The language was grown up and tidy. Underneath, they debated logistics, as if I were a variable to be minimized. I felt cold and oddly adult. To be assessed like that was a new experience for me. I have been assessed plenty in my life, but not by those I'd raised. I had raised people who learned to answer a phone. I had taught my son to be present. To see his name in those messages beside phrases like "let her be" felt like a small betrayal. I confronted one child gently. I asked, "Why would you say such things about me?" The response was not unkind. "We were trying to protect you from discomfort." Protect me from what? From being asked, from being present. I listened as they explained. They spoke of small missteps I might make, of conversations that could become awkward. They invoked kindness, but kindness wrapped in a decision made without you is still a decision about you, not for you. Some neighbors took my side. Mrs. Glover from down the lane said, "If you want to go, you go. Nobody gets to decide your belonging." Others counseled caution. "She's only trying to save everyone from hurt," they said. It was like being watched from both sides of a glass. Compassion on one side, condescension on the other. The forwarded screenshot had my name in headline bold. I read it over and over. I felt both fury and sorrow. Fury because my adult children had become gatekeepers to my life. Sorrow because their language suggested they thought exclusion was a gift. At night, I sat with a pen and wrote down the things I wanted to say. I prepared a short, honest line. "If you think I'm fragile, tell me plainly. Don't decide for me." That seemed both reasonable and brave. I did not want drama. I wanted to be consulted and treated like the adult I had been for decades. When I raised the topic at dinner, my voice was steady. Some faces fell, some grew defensive. I tried to be clear. "I love you. I want to be part of your plans. And if there are times I should step back, tell me. But don't debate me like I'm a policy." The words landed with a mix of relief and discomfort. They called it protection. I called it being shut out. It happens so quickly. A holiday, the anniversary of a beloved aunt, a reunion that everyone has circled on their calendars. The family chat becomes a timekeeper. The decisions that would have once been made with phone calls and conversations were now made with taps and shorthand. And this is when exclusion stops being merely painful and becomes consequential. The reunion was a week away. Plans had been posted. Venue, times, responsibilities, places at the table were named. Tasks were assigned. I read the thread and saw dates and arrangements and the gentle language of people trying to be efficient. Then I saw, in bold, RSVP by Thursday. The RSVP list closed without me. That small administrative action had practical results. Catering numbers, transport plans, and who was to sit where. I called my daughter. She answered quickly, voices flitting in the background. "Mom," she said, "we're trying to keep this simple." The word simple again, a cover for decisions made on someone else's behalf. "Could you maybe stay home that weekend? It might be less stressful." Less stressful for whom? The calendar was now operating as a detachment mechanism. If you are not on the RSVP list, the room will not set a place for you. If you are not included in the rota, someone will not call you to fill a shift. The digital machinery had effects that moved through the physical world. Time compresses decisions. Deadlines make people choose expedience over conversation. People prefer fast answers because they are tidy. But tidy answers leave corners unspoken. The family was asking me to allow a small erasure so the event would go smoothly. They used gentle phrases. They invoked thoughtfulness. They did not, in those moments, invoke inclusion. I remember an instance from long ago. My husband and I once rearranged a schedule so that a neighbor could attend her daughter's graduation. We called and explained and asked permission. No one assumed. That is the rhythm I wanted. Ask, agree, act, not decide and post. When the deadline arrived, I sat with my tea and watched the blue ticks appear next to messages. The chat made a quick survey. who could bring chairs, who would pick up a pie, who would set tables. The list moved and locked. I felt the tiny mechanics of exclusion close around me. My son texted me later that day. "It's complicated, Mom." Complicated is often a polite cloak for convenience. There was also the pressure of other people's emotional time. Someone argued that my presence might lead to awkward questions, or that my attendance might require elder accommodations the family was not ready to arrange. Practical details become moral ones. Is it considerate to exclude someone to avoid uncomfortable moments, or is it cowardice? I had to decide fast. I could accept the break they offered and sit out the reunion to keep the peace. Or I could insist that they call me before making such decisions and risk changing relationships. Either choice had real consequences for how meals would be shared, who would hold plates, and who would tell stories of love. Once when the gathering happened, they asked her to RSVP in the group, and the RSVP list closed. Without her, it came from the softest place. A late afternoon phone call from my daughter. She asked if I could pop over after lunch just to talk. I brewed tea and smoothed my skirt the way I always do when I know I might have to sit and listen hard. The kitchen smelled of lemon and old lemon oil, the one my mother used for polishing silver. I told myself to breathe slowly, breathe like someone who remembers how to stay steady. My daughter's eyes were apologetic when she started. She told me that the family chat had become a kind of shorthand for avoiding awkwardness. One small misread comment, something someone had said years ago, in a different room, in a different mood, had been repeated in a whisper to someone else. It had been passed along until it became a story, and the story had tipped the wife of the neighbor into fear. From fear she had interpreted what she saw as a pattern and then told the people closest to her in private. The private discussion became a subthread. That subthread was read, misread, and amplified until it took a life of its own. "I'm sorry," my daughter said, and she meant it. She said they were trying to spare me embarrassment. They were trying to spare themselves the discomfort of dealing with a delicate situation faced. They worried about things that had nothing to do with me. Jostled memories, years of conflicting accounts, a tendency in the family to avoid loud conversations. They'd thought that excluding me here and there would be kindness, a way to keep me from feeling awkward in the heat of things. Hearing this pulled two feelings at once. The first was a softening. I could see how fear makes people fold away from uncomfortable truths. I could see how convenience, fear, and a wish to protect one another had made a small decision snowball. I forgave them a little in that moment, because I could imagine panics I had felt in the dark when children are sick and plans fall apart. Compassion is a muscle. Sometimes we all pull it too tight. The other feeling was firmer. Understanding motive did not make the messages unreadable. Knowing why they had built a quiet room without my voice did not make the room less empty. If anything, it sharpened my need to be treated with the ordinary courtesies they seemed to have set aside. It made me want, not vengeance but clarity, a simple practice by which they would ask, rather than decide. So I set a new horizon for myself. I would not demand that every hurt be erased. I would not insist on public apologies like a parade, but I would ask politely, plainly for ways that preserved both tenderness and dignity. A message could be private, an invite could be called, a plan could be shared. These were small things. They were also everything. We sat at the table and made a quiet plan to talk with the family, to give them a chance to explain in person rather than behind screens. My daughter promised she would speak up at the next small gathering and say simply, "We should include Grandma unless she asks not to be." That seemed fair. I folded my hands around my tea and felt steadier. The world was not fixed by talk alone, but talk is where repair begins. It is a modest thing, conversation. It is also the hinge that opens the door back to belonging. When I say I made a plan, I mean something that fit like a glove. Not showy, but useful. I wrote it down in my neat hand, the way I balance a checkbook, short items, bullet points. Call before you post about an event I might want to attend. Use private messages for sensitive topics about me. Put the rota and the invitations in a shared calendar, rather than just in the chat. If someone thought I might be uncomfortable, ask me directly before deciding. A few simple courtesies. I asked my daughter to help me set the rules. We would suggest a short family conversation, not an airing of grievance, but a practical agreement. I wanted to preserve kindness. I also wanted a record, not because I mistrusted anyone on principle, but because habits change faster than hearts do. Written requests help habit bend toward respect. That there was cost. Always there is. My son grumbled the night I suggested a family meeting. Is this really necessary? He asked, as if asking for a phone call before posting a brunch was akin to filing a report. A cousin rolled their eyes in a message that was meant to be private, but somehow leaked into the group. Grandma's making a thing out of a thing. Some friends advised me to keep my peace. Let it go, Evie. Life is short. Even a neighbor who'd been my confidant suggested caution, warning that the family might split over something small. People prefer the quiet option. They like to avoid the friction of honesty. Sometimes not speaking seems easier than the small pain of correction. I understood the logic. I also knew my history. I had taught children how to check their work, how to return borrowed tools, how to call when plans change. The truth is, asking for a call before posting, for a short private message before making a public decision, is not demanding the moon. It is asking for basic human dignity. So I accepted the short-term awkwardness. I expected the words sensitive or stubborn. They came. The cousin's eyebrow was not the worst of it. The worst was hearing someone say I was making it worse. I took it in. I did not shout. I wrote down each objection and then quietly explained why the objection missed the point. If your grandmother wants to help with the lemon tart and you decide she should be spared the fuss, tell her first. If someone worries about an embarrassing moment, address that worry with the person you fear might be embarrassed, not by arranging their absence like a surprise. The real cost was private. A few chilly evenings, a curt message, an awkward brunch. The public cost was gossip for a day or two. The long-term cost, potentially, was a family habit corrected by a tough conversation rather than softened out of existence. I preferred it that way. I would trade a week of cold shoulders for years of being treated like an adult. That night, my daughter texted, quietly, "Are you sure? This will change everything." When you make space for a conversation, the town notices. People like to take positions in the quiet. Some will cheer you on, others will tidy the edges with a warning. I felt the heat from many directions. Mrs. Alden from church stopped by with a plate of scones and said, "I think you're right, Evelyn. People do forget to ask." Her voice was the kind that steadies you, but other voices sounded like weather. Cousin messages reminding me of family harmony. A neighbor who said, "Perhaps a little patience would help." Social pressure folds over you like a soft blanket that sometimes hides more than it protects. The church offered a mediator, a kind woman with a voice like a hymn. She said she would sit with us at my kitchen table if we thought it would help. I said yes. I wanted someone respectable, someone who could keep the air calm while people spoke plainly. Word moved beyond the room. A friend messaged me privately. "You'll do fine. Tell them the truth." Another voiced concern. "Be careful. Things can get messy when online and in person try to sort themselves." It was true. Digital whispers can harden into real rifts if not managed. Meanwhile, family texts kept arriving. Some were small acts of kindness, offers to drive me to the city for an appointment, and neighbors promised to mow the lawn. Others were curt. "Less talk, more life," one message said. That one stung because it was a suggestion I should shrink to fit the pace of others. The mediator came the following week. She sat at my table with a legal pad and a steady look. We agreed on ground rules: speak without interruption, listen without planning your reply, and name facts rather than speculate. To my surprise, the format helped. My son spoke first, defensive but earnest. He said they didn't mean to erase me. The neighbor's wife, when she spoke, was soft with worry. She had been frightened by a mistaken memory, and by her own insecurity. She had told others some things that weren't quite true. It was human, messy, tender, but heat from the outside does not vanish because you speak. It changes shape. The town's aunties had already taken sides in whispers at the post office, and their opinions filtered back through polite conversations. I received a letter from someone I had not seen in years, praising my courage to ask for inclusion. Another note said I should be less public about family matters. The edges of loyalty were shifting. What I held on to was simple. I had asked for basic courtesies, not dominion. I had asked for a phone call, not a tribunal. Still, I knew the bigger risk, that airing the issue would make a spectacle. I had to be careful. Louder truth can sometimes wound more than the original cut. That is why the mediator was important. She kept us on the simple ask and away from recrimination. Tomorrow, we would sit at the kitchen table with a neighbor as witness. The night before the meeting was one of those nights where time stretches and memories crowd the room. I could hear the house breathe. the refrigerator's soft tick, the clock's steady metronome. I made tea and set it on the table, then paced a little until the steam had gone cool. I thought of my mother, who used to say, "Child, don't make a small thing into a mountain unless it's got a path to the top." I thought of my husband's hands, the way he folded maps and paper with care. Those small tactile memories steadied me. They reminded me that big decisions are just small ones, stacked together in an honest way. There were moments I considered retreat. It would have been easy to close the app and let the messages pass like leaves on a stream. I could have told myself to be grateful for Sunday dinners and not make waves. I nearly did. I pictured curling up with a book and letting the world keep its rhythm without me. Sometimes silence seems like survival. But when I imagined silence, I also imagined the slow change it would make. The little practices that erode dignity, not being called, not being asked, not being accounted for. I thought of the small indignities that collect until they become something else. An entire life rearranged by omission. I didn't want that for myself. I didn't want it for the young ones watching how elders are treated. So I wrote a short note, not an essay, not a complaint, a few sentences I could read without my voice shaking. I wrote, "I noticed I'm often not included in plans made in the group. I understand wanting to spare feelings, but being excluded feels like being decided about, not asked. I would appreciate a phone call when something concerns me. I would welcome being invited to family events unless I say otherwise." I folded the paper like my father taught me and put it in my pocket. I slept poorly. The house felt fuller in the dark, with all the possible outcomes: reconciliation, awkwardness, hard words. I tried to imagine everyone at the table the next day listening, not to prove points, but to learn how to live together again respectably. The thoughts steadied me more than I expected. Before dawn, I rehearse a line my husband used to say, "Be the person you intend to be, especially when no one watches." It's a small moral map. It keeps me honest and keeps me brave. I almost turned the phone off for good. I almost let the soft digital wall stay up. Then, I put on a clean blouse, made the kettles sing, tucked the note into my pocket, and went to the table to be present. I would ask for what felt right. I would try to keep the path gentle, but firm. The kitchen table felt like an altar that morning, not religious, but a place where vows are renewed. We had the mediator from the church, my daughter, my son, the neighbor who'd witnessed the earlier frictions, and the cousin who'd been quietly kind. I put the note on the table and did not speak until everyone had a cup of tea. I read the note plainly. No flourishes, no accusing phrases, facts, feelings, requests. I noticed I'm often not included. Please call before posting about plans that involve me. When I finished, the quiet in the room felt like the hush that comes after someone tells the truth. I suggested practical changes. A set of simple group rules could be pinned in the chat. Call before posting sensitive items. Post invitations as calendar events with RSVP. Use a private message for difficult decisions. I proposed a short period of practice, 3 months, then review. I offered to be flexible. I said I would accept being asked to sit some things out if there were medical or emotional reasons, but that those reasons should be addressed directly to me, not negotiated behind a screen. My son's first reaction was a tight silence. He looked at his hands and said, "You think the chat can be fixed with a list?" He sounded both tired and wounded, as if he feared being turned into an inventory. I told him gently, "I'm asking for courtesies, not a manual. We've used lists before, for shopping, for repairs. This is just another list for civility." Some family members resisted, calling it fussy. Others nodded. The mediator helped keep things calm. "Let's try small steps. If they don't work, we adjust," she said. The idea of a 3-month trial gave people a way to test the change without feeling trapped forever. Before the meeting ended, my son reached across the table and took my hand. It was not a grand gesture. It was a hand that had been grabbing tools and school books, and now it was holding mine. He said, quietly, "I didn't realize how it looked. I'm sorry." The apology was not a cataclysm. It was an offering. I accepted it. We wrote the rules down. We agreed on the review date. It felt tentative. It felt necessary. By the time we sat down again at my kitchen table, the house felt as if it had been holding its breath with me. The mediator set a small stack of printed screenshots between us, so that there would be no mistaking what had been said and what had been meant. The light above the table threw a soft pool on the page. My hands held steady, folded and unfolded the corner of a napkin until my voice felt ready. I began with the small truth. I had joined the chat because I wanted to see my family in there every day. I wanted to laugh at a photo of a birthday cake and to know when a baby took a first step. I said plainly, I do not want to be an afterthought in my family's life. That line felt heavy and necessary. It was not an accusation. It was a boundary held as a plea. Screenshots were read aloud. Innocent captions that had stung were shared. The subthread that discussed whether I should be included or shielded was there, printed like evidence. As the mediator asked questions, voices rose and dipped. Some explanations were clumsy. A nephew admitted he thought Grandma would prefer not to be fussed over. A cousin said they had worried about awkward moments. The neighbor's wife, whom I had not met often, explained in a thin voice how a misread photograph had frightened her maid. Her think something private was being repeated more publicly than it should. Her fear was real, even if her jumping to decisions had been hasty. Then one of the grandchildren, small and earnest, blurted the line that stopped the room for a moment. I thought Grandma liked it when we surprised her. The child's face was open and confused. The room softened. It is strange how a child's simple honesty can cut through grown-up explanations like scissors through string. My son looked older than his years in that kitchen light. He said, halting, we tried to protect you. He meant it. He also meant the opposite. The two things can be true at once. I didn't want a theater of blame. I wanted repair. I suggested a small, concrete thing. A chat charter pinned to the top of the family thread. 12 lines, simple habits. A phone call before posts that relate to someone directly. Calendar invites for events. A promise to avoid private subthreads where decisions about someone are made without their presence. We talked about rotating moderators and about the gentle discipline of asking, not assuming. Some bristled, some rolled eyes, but one by one people agreed that a small written covenant could stop small slights before they became big wounds. The mediator helped us translate feelings into policy, how to be humane in a digital age. At the end, in that small quiet of the table, my daughter lifted her phone and typed a message into the group. Everyone watched, a little like a child waiting to see whether the rain will stop. Then the little blue dots appeared. The message was short and warm. Welcome back, Mom. I'm sorry, we'll do better. It was not a grand apology. It was something better, a beginning. We all watched as the family thread, which had been a place of exclusion only hours before, accepted its first public note of repair. The small gesture felt like a bridge being put in place. Not dramatic, not theatrical, but serviceable. I stared at the words and felt something loosen in my chest. It did not erase the hours of loneliness or the soft cut of previous messages, but it did what I had asked for. It acknowledged me in public, not merely in private. For a long moment, no one spoke. The days that followed were quiet, steady work. We turned the pieces of the charter into practical habits, the kind of small commitments that, if kept, create peace. The first thing we did was pin the charter to the top of the chat so it would be visible every time someone opened the thread. That little pinned note did more than remind folks of rules. It reminded them what we were choosing to be. We set up rotating coordinators. For a month, each adult took a turn to check the calendar and confirm that Grandma had been told about events directly. A text that said, "We're planning a picnic Sunday, would you like to come?" was a small habit that mattered. When someone had to decide about childcare or a delicate health update, they were asked to take it offline, first to call, not to caption. When a slip happened, and slips did happen, the charter gave us a way back. Once, a caption ran by in the early hours, and I felt the old prickle. I called my daughter. We spoke, not in anger, but in the calm way of people practicing a new muscle. She apologized. She said she had been tired. We both laughed at the smallness and the largeness of that moment. The mediator, who had agreed to be on call for a while, helped when emotions flared and kept us from returning to old defenses. The calendar became a gentle public ledger. Birthdays, visits, medical appointments, and community events. When invitations were made, they went out as events with reminders. Someone learned to attach photos only after checking captions. Another learned the small kindness of tagging me alongside the photo, so that I would see myself as part of the memory, not merely as a bystander. It is surprising how a single small habit can shift the tone of many things. Trust rebuilt itself, the way houses are fixed, one small repair at a time. It is not dramatic work. It is not the part of the story people like to read about, but it is the part that keeps roofs from leaking. A weekend visit, then a weekly phone call, then a small potluck where no one snuck photos without asking each, was a stitch. If I am honest, Some nights, the little blue dots still make my breath catch. Old habits are sticky, but then a photo appears with my name in the caption, or someone calls to ask if I want extra pie, and the catch goes away. What this felt like in practice was not performative, it was daily consideration. When a cousin forgot and left me out of a plan, the charter guided our response, not a storm of accusation, but a quick note and a correction. We learned to assume good intent while also asking for accountability. Families do not change overnight. We do, however, change. We grow new habits that honor everyone in the family. I kept my chair by the window and the kettle on the stove. I also kept my phone charged in a new way, not as an intruder, but as a tool of kindness. If there is a short, stubborn lesson I want to leave you with, it is this: dignity in a digital age is practical. It is not a dramatic speech or a public spectacle. It is a set of small behaviors practiced day after day until they become the neighborhood's way of being. First, ask before you post. A photo is a lovely thing, but a caption without consent can feel like a bulletin about someone else's life. If the moment involves a person, give them a phone call or a private message first. Second, include people directly. If something involves grandma gets told. If it is about care, call the person you are caring about before you decide. The simple act of invitation says, "You matter to us." Third, keep private threads private and avoid deciding about someone in their absence. If you need to discuss whether someone should attend, do it gently and include that person in the conversation when appropriate. There is no dignity in deciding for someone without their voice. Fourth, make simple charters. Write a short list of habits for your family chat or neighborhood group. Pin it, refer to it. It's not policing, it's mutual courtesy. Fifth, steward forgiveness. People make mistakes, habits harden. When you want to repair, choose language that opens rather than wounds. An honest, short apology goes farther than a long defense. You can use these scripts if you like. Say, "May I call you about this?" Or, "Would you mind if I tag you in this photo?" Or, if a slip happens, "I'm sorry, I meant to ask you first." Those 3 small lines change the tone of many days. This is, at heart, an American kind of ethic. Fairness mixed with civility. We believe in dignity and in treating people as persons, not problems. We believe in solving things with courage and courtesy. The country's promise is not just a headline. It is a daily practice of decency that begins at kitchen tables and in the quiet of family chats. We were not perfect. We stumbled. We had nights when the phone felt heavy and mornings when the kettle was an old friend. But we practiced better ways to belong. We learned that belonging requires both invitation and permission. If you remember nothing else, remember this: being seen is not a grand thing. It is a habit. Start by asking a small question, and keep asking until the habit grows. After the story aired for friends and the small town, messages began to arrive. Neighbors told me they had put a pinned note in their own family thread. A woman from church wrote, "Because of you, we call Mum before we post her pictures." A grandson sent a text, "I never thought about captions, now I caption." These were small confessions that felt like flowers left on a doorstep.